Hey, hello, and welcome back. It's so good to have you here with me again. I'm Alex, and this is English in Fluency, the podcast where we slow everything down, we speak clearly, and we help you get better at understanding real, natural English, one story at a time. If this is your first time listening, I want you to know something important before we even start. You don't need to understand every single word today. Not one. You just need to relax, breathe, and let the story carry you. That's how listening skills actually grow. Little by little. The same way a plant grows when nobody is watching it too closely. So here's a question for you before we begin. Do you know someone who is quiet? Someone who doesn't talk much in big groups, who maybe looks a little uncomfortable at parties, who prefers a small dinner with one or two close friends instead of a loud room full of strangers? Maybe that person is your brother, your coworker, your neighbor. Or maybe, just maybe, that person is you. If it is you, I want you to lean in a little closer today, because this episode is for you. And even if it's not you, stay with me, because by the end of this story, I think you'll understand quiet people a little better, and maybe you'll even admire them a bit more. Today's story is called, well, it doesn't really have an official title, but if it did, it might be something like The Quiet Ones Feel Deeply. It's about a young man named Milo, an introvert, who spent most of his life believing that something was wrong with him, simply because he wasn't loud, wasn't the center of attention, and didn't make friends easily the way other people seemed to. But over time, Milo learned something beautiful. He learned that introverts don't build weak relationships. They build strong ones, deep ones, the kind that last for years, even for a whole lifetime. Stay with me till the end, because I promise you, this story has a few surprises, a little heartbreak, and a warm, honest ending that I think will stay in your heart. All right, let's begin. Milo grew up in a small town, the kind of town where everybody seemed to know everybody else's business. His mother ran a little flower shop on the corner of the main street, and his father worked long hours at a printing company just outside of town. Milo was the middle child, with an older sister named Dara, who could talk to absolutely anyone, and a younger brother named Theo, who was loud from the moment he could speak. Milo, on the other hand, was different from the very beginning. As a baby, he cried less than other babies. As a toddler, he would sit quietly in the corner of a room, watching everyone else play, content just to observe. His mother used to say that Milo came into the world already thinking deeply about something, and nobody quite knew what. By the time Milo started school, his quietness had become something people noticed, and not always in a kind way. Teachers would write on his report cards, "Milo is a good student, but he needs to participate more in class." Other kids would ask him, almost every single day, "Why are you so quiet? Are you okay? Are you sad?" And Milo, who was actually a very happy child on the inside, full of imagination and curiosity, didn't know how to explain that he wasn't sad at all. He simply liked to listen more than he liked to speak. He liked to think before opening his mouth. He liked to watch the world for a while before deciding what he wanted to say about it. This is something I want you to really notice as we go through today's episode, because it's an important vocabulary point too. When we say someone is an introvert, we don't mean they are shy, and we don't mean they are unfriendly. Shyness is about fear, a fear of being judged. But being an introvert is different. It's about where you get your energy from. Introverts often feel tired after being around lots of people for a long time, even if they enjoy those people. They need quiet time alone to recharge, the same way a phone needs to be plugged into a charger. Extroverts, on the other hand, usually feel energized by being around people. Being with others gives them power, not tiredness. Neither one is better than the other. They're just different, like two different kinds of weather. Keep that word, recharge, in your mind, because we'll use it again. Back to Milo. As he grew older, through primary school and into his early teenage years, he began to feel like an outsider, even in his own family. Dinner conversations at home were loud and fast, with Dara telling stories about her day, laughing loudly, and Theo interrupting everyone with jokes. Milo would sit there quietly, eating his food, listening to everything, but rarely adding his own words unless someone asked him directly. His parents loved him, of course, deeply and without question, but sometimes his father would look at him and say, gently, "Milo, you're so quiet tonight. Everything okay, son?" And Milo would nod and smile, because he didn't have the words yet to explain that he was actually listening very carefully to every single thing being said, storing it away in his memory, thinking about it, turning it over in his mind like a stone he was examining from every angle. Now here's something that might surprise you. Many introverts, just like Milo, are excellent listeners, and being an excellent listener is actually one of the most powerful tools for building strong relationships. Think about the last time someone truly listened to you without interrupting, without checking their phone, without waiting for their turn to talk about themselves. How did that feel? Pretty amazing, right? That feeling of being truly heard is rare, and it's a gift. Milo, without even realizing it, was giving that gift to people his whole life. He just didn't know its value yet. When Milo turned 14, something happened that changed the direction of his story a little. A new family moved into the house next door, and they had a daughter around Milo's age named Ren. Ren was unusual too, though in a different way from Milo. She was creative, artistic, always carrying a sketchbook with her, drawing birds and trees and strange little creatures from her imagination. She wasn't exactly quiet like Milo, but she wasn't loud either. She was somewhere in the middle, comfortable talking but also comfortable with silence. One afternoon, Milo was sitting on the low wall outside his house, reading a book about the ocean, when Ren walked past with her sketchbook under her arm. Instead of just walking by, the way most new neighbors might, she stopped and asked him, "What are you reading?" Milo looked up, a little surprised that someone was actually talking to him, and showed her the cover. It was a book filled with photographs of deep-sea creatures, strange glowing fish that live in the darkest parts of the ocean where sunlight never reaches. Ren's eyes lit up immediately. "I love drawing things like that," she said. "Things that most people never see." And just like that, without any big dramatic moment, a friendship began. What I love about this part of the story, and what I want you to really pay attention to, is how simple the beginning was. There was no grand speech, no big performance, just two quiet kids who found a small, shared interest and built something real from that tiny starting point. This is actually one of the biggest secrets about how introverts build relationships. They don't need 100 friends. They need one or two people who truly understand them, and they build those friendships slowly, carefully, like building a house brick by brick instead of throwing up a tent that might blow away in the wind. Over the next few years, Milo and Ren became close friends. They would spend hours together, not always talking. Sometimes Ren would draw while Milo read, both of them sitting in comfortable silence on his back porch. And neither one felt the need to fill that silence with unnecessary words. If you've never experienced that kind of friendship, where silence feels comfortable instead of awkward, I want you to imagine it now. Picture two people sitting together, doing their own separate things, but still feeling completely connected. That's a very specific and beautiful kind of closeness, and it's something introverts often crave more than anything else. Milo's sister Dara used to tease him a little about it. "You two just sit there," she would say, laughing. "You don't even talk." But Milo would just smile, because he understood something Dara didn't fully understand yet. Talking isn't the only way to connect with someone. Sometimes, just being present with another person, sharing space, sharing time, is its own kind of conversation. A quiet language that doesn't need any words at all. Let's pause here for a small practice moment. I want you to think of a phrase we used a moment ago. Comfortable silence. This means a silence that doesn't feel strange or uncomfortable. A silence where you feel relaxed, even though nobody is talking. Try saying that phrase out loud with me. Comfortable silence. Good. Now think about your own life. Is there someone with whom you can sit in comfortable silence? Maybe a parent, a close friend, a partner. Hold that person in your mind for a second. That relationship, whoever it is probably a very strong and trusted one, because comfortable silence usually only happens between people who deeply trust each other. As high school continued, Milo faced new challenges. Group projects were difficult for him, because he was often paired with loud, confident classmates who would take control of every conversation, leaving little room for Milo's quieter voice. Parties were another challenge. His classmates would invite him, and sometimes he would go, standing near the edge of the room, holding a drink, watching everyone dance and laugh and shout over the music. After 20 or 30 minutes, he would start to feel a heavy tiredness settle over him, not because he was bored, but because all that noise and energy was draining him, pulling something out of him that he desperately needed to protect. He would often leave these parties early, walking home under the street lights, feeling relieved the moment the door closed behind him and he was back in his quiet bedroom. Some of his classmates thought he was strange for leaving early, or even a little rude. But what they didn't understand was that Milo wasn't rejecting them. He simply needed to recharge, the same way we talked about earlier. Loud environments cost him energy, while quiet environments gave energy back to him. It wasn't a choice, exactly. It was simply how he was built. The way some plants need full sunlight, and others thrive better in shade. There's a really useful expression here that I want to teach you, and it's one you'll hear native speakers use quite often. When someone says they are peopled out, it means they've spent so much time with people that they feel completely exhausted and need to be alone for a while. Milo felt peopled out almost every single week of his teenage life. Try that phrase again with me. Peopled out. It's informal, casual, the kind of thing you might say to a close friend rather than in a formal work email. but it's very common and very useful. Now here's where the story gets a little more emotional, so stay with me. When Milo was 17, his grandmother, a woman named Inez, who lived just a few streets away, became seriously ill. Inez had always been one of the few people who truly understood Milo without needing an explanation. She never asked him why he was so quiet. She never pushed him to talk more or be more outgoing. Instead, she would simply invite him over for tea, and they would sit together in her small kitchen, sometimes talking about books, sometimes just watching the birds outside her window, sometimes saying almost nothing at all for an hour at a time. When Inez got sick, Milo visited her almost every single day after school. He would sit by her bed, sometimes reading to her, sometimes just holding her hand while she slept. His sister Dara found it difficult to visit as often, not because she didn't love their grandmother, but because seeing Inez in that condition made her deeply uncomfortable, and she didn't know what to say during the visits. Milo never had that problem. He didn't need to fill every moment with conversation. He was completely comfortable simply being present, offering his quiet company as a form of comfort. And honestly, this turned out to be exactly what his grandmother needed most during those final months. One evening, only a few weeks before she passed away, Inez squeezed Milo's hand and said something he would remember for the rest of his life. She said, "Milo, don't ever let anyone tell you that quiet people don't love deeply. Some of the strongest love I have ever felt in my life has come in complete silence." Milo cried that night, alone in his room, but he also felt something shift inside him. For the first time, he began to understand that his quietness wasn't a weakness he needed to fix. It was actually a strength, a gift he could offer to the people he loved. I want to pause again here, just for a moment, because I know this part of the story might feel a little heavy for some of you. If you're going through a difficult time right now, if you've lost someone you love, I just want to say, take care of yourself. Be gentle with your own heart, and know that quiet presence, simply being there for someone, truly matters more than we often realize. Let's continue with the story, moving a little forward in time now. After finishing high school, Milo went to a university in a bigger city, a few hours away from his hometown. This was a huge change for him. Suddenly, he was surrounded by thousands of new students, all strangers, all in a completely new environment. His roommate in the dormitory was a cheerful, extremely social young man named Cass, who seemed to know everyone on their floor within the first 3 days. Cass would invite Milo to parties almost every weekend, and at first, Milo felt enormous pressure to say yes every single time, worried that if he said no too often, Cass would think he was boring or unfriendly. But slowly, Milo began to understand something important about himself and about relationships in general. He didn't need to change who he was in order to be liked. He started saying yes to some invitations, the smaller gatherings, the quiet dinners with just a few people, and he started saying no, politely and honestly, to the huge, loud parties that drained him completely. To his surprise, Cass didn't get upset or offended. In fact, Cass respected him more for being honest about what he needed. "You know yourself pretty well," Cass told him one evening. "That's actually kind of rare, man. Most people your age don't have a clue what they need." This is such an important lesson. and I want to slow down here so you can really absorb it. Building strong relationships as an introvert isn't about pretending to be someone you're not. It isn't about forcing yourself to become loud and outgoing just to fit in. It's about being honest, clearly and kindly, about what you need, and trusting that the right people, the people worth having in your life, will respect and even admire that honesty. Milo learned this lesson slowly, through trial and error. But once he learned it, everything started to change for him. During his second year at university, Milo joined a small book club, almost by accident. He saw a flyer on a notice board advertising weekly meetings to discuss science fiction novels, and something about it appealed to him immediately. Unlike parties, book clubs gave him structure. There was a topic to discuss, a shared purpose, and he didn't need to make random small talk about the weather or gossip about people he didn't know. He could simply talk about ideas, about characters, about themes in the books they were reading, which felt so much more natural to him. It was in this book club that Milo met a woman named Sina. Sina was thoughtful and observant, someone who, like Milo, preferred to listen carefully before speaking, but when she did speak, her words were always full of insight and depth. During their very first meeting, while other members argued loudly about which character in the novel was the true hero of the story, Sina quietly turned to Milo and asked, "What did you think about the ending? I felt like something was missing, but I can't explain what." Milo, who had been thinking about exactly that question for the whole meeting, suddenly found himself talking easily, explaining his thoughts in detail, surprised at how comfortable he felt. This is another important truth about introverts and relationships that I want to highlight clearly. Introverts often struggle with small talk, that light, casual conversation about nothing in particular, like the weather or traffic or what someone had for breakfast. But give an introvert a topic they genuinely care about, something with depth and meaning, and suddenly they can talk for hours without feeling tired at all. Small talk drains an introvert's energy. Deep talk, on the other hand, can actually give energy back to them. Isn't that interesting? It's almost the opposite of what many people assume about quiet people. Milo and Sina started meeting outside of the book club too, first for coffee, then for long walks around the university campus, talking about everything from their childhood memories to their fears about the future to their favorite obscure songs that nobody else seemed to know. Their friendship deepened slowly, gradually, the way a river carves through stone over many years, rather than the way a flood arrives suddenly and disappears just as fast. And this slow pace wasn't a weakness in their relationship. It was actually its greatest strength, because everything they built together was built on a solid, honest foundation. Let's take another quick practice pause here. I used an expression a moment ago, solid foundation. This means a strong base, something firm and reliable that everything else is built upon, like the concrete foundation of a house. We often use this expression for relationships too. We might say, their marriage was built on a solid foundation of trust and respect. Try using this phrase in your own sentence right now, maybe out loud if you're comfortable, describing a relationship in your own life that has a solid foundation. As months passed, Milo began to realize that his feelings for Sina were becoming something more than friendship. But here is where his introverted nature created a real challenge for him. Unlike his roommate, Cass, who could confidently ask anyone out without a second thought, Milo found the idea of expressing his romantic feelings absolutely terrifying. He replayed conversations in his head for days, imagining different ways to tell Sina how he felt, and then talking himself out of every single one of them, convinced she would reject him, or worse, that their friendship would become awkward and broken forever. This went on for almost an entire semester. Milo would open his mouth, ready to say something meaningful, and then the words would simply disappear, swallowed back down by fear. His sister Dara, when he called her one weekend and finally admitted what was happening, laughed gently and said, "Milo, you've been like this since you were a kid. You feel everything so deeply, but you keep it locked up inside like a treasure chest with no key." Milo knew she was right, but knowing something and being able to change it are two very different things, aren't they? Eventually, it was Sina who made the first move, though not in a way anyone would expect. One evening, during one of their long walks, she stopped walking completely, turned to face him under a streetlight, and said simply, "Milo, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me, even if it's scary." Milo's heart was pounding so hard he was sure she could hear it. "Do you feel something between us? Because I do, and I've been too afraid to say it." For a moment, Milo said nothing at all, and Sina's face began to fall, worried she had made a terrible mistake. But then Milo, gathering every bit of courage he had inside him, simply nodded and said quietly, "Yes, I've felt it for months. I just didn't know how to say it." I love this moment in the story so much, because it shows something really important about introverted people in relationships. Sometimes the depth of feeling is there, powerful and real, long before the words ever arrive. Introverts often need a little more time, a little more courage, to say the big, vulnerable things out loud. But that doesn't mean the feelings aren't real or aren't strong. Often, they're stronger than anyone realizes, precisely because they've been building quietly, privately, for a long time before finally being spoken. Milo and Sina began dating shortly after that evening, and their relationship, much like their friendship before it, grew slowly and steadily. They didn't rush into anything. They didn't feel pressure to post about their relationship constantly online or to prove anything to anyone else. They simply enjoyed being together, quietly, deeply, comfortably. Sina, being somewhat introverted herself, understood exactly what Milo needed, and Milo, in turn, learned to understand her needs as well. When one of them needed quiet time alone, the other didn't take it personally. They understood that needing space wasn't rejection. It was simply self-care, a way of recharging so they could return to each other fully present and fully engaged. Now, I want to shift the story a little bit because relationships, even good ones, even strong ones, aren't always easy. And I think it's important for this story to be honest about that too. During their final year at university, Milo and Sina faced a difficult period. Sina received an incredible job opportunity in a city far away, on the other side of the country, a job that would require her to move almost immediately after graduation. Milo, meanwhile, had already accepted a position closer to home, near his family, in the small town where he grew up. For weeks, neither of them wanted to talk about what this meant for their relationship. It felt too painful, too complicated, too overwhelming to face directly. Milo, true to his introverted nature, began withdrawing even further into himself, spending hours alone, thinking, worrying, imagining every possible outcome, but sharing almost none of it with Sina. This time, his quietness wasn't helping him. It was hurting the relationship, because Senna had no idea what was going on inside his head, and his silence was starting to feel like distance, like he was pulling away from her emotionally. One night, Senna finally confronted him gently but firmly. "Milo, I love how deeply you feel things," she said, sitting across from him at their small kitchen table. "But I can't read your mind. When you go quiet like this, I don't know if you're thinking, or if you're pulling away from me, or if you're planning to end things. I need you to tell me what's happening inside your head, even if it's messy, even if you're not sure yet." Milo sat there for a long moment, feeling the familiar fear rising in his chest, the fear of saying the wrong thing, of not having the perfect words ready. But he also remembered what his grandmother had told him years before, about quiet people loving deeply. He realized that loving deeply wasn't enough on its own. Sometimes, love also requires the courage to speak, even when speaking feels difficult. So he told her everything. He told her how terrified he was of losing her. He told her how much he loved his hometown, his family, the quiet, slow rhythm of the life he had built there. He told her how much he admired her ambition and didn't want to be the reason she gave up an incredible opportunity. He told her all of it, messy and imperfect, without preparing perfect sentences in advance, just letting the truth come out as honestly as he could manage. And Sina listened, really listened, the way Milo himself had always listened to others throughout his whole life. This is such an important lesson for introverts in relationships, and honestly, for everyone, whether they're introverted or extroverted. Strong relationships aren't built only on deep listening. They also require honest speaking, even when it's uncomfortable, even when the words don't come out perfectly. Milo had always been excellent at the listening side of relationships. This moment taught him that he also needed to develop the speaking side, the courage to share his inner world with the people he trusted most, rather than keeping everything locked away inside, however tempting that might feel. After that long, emotional conversation, Milo and Sina decided together, as a team, rather than making separate decisions in isolation, that they would try a long-distance relationship for 1 year while Senna took the job opportunity. It wasn't an easy decision, and honestly, the story doesn't pretend that this next part was simple or smooth. Long-distance relationships are hard for anyone, but they can be especially challenging for introverts, who often express love through physical presence, through comfortable shared silence, through small, quiet gestures, rather than long phone calls or constant messaging. But Milo and Sina found their own way to make it work. They scheduled video calls, not every single day, which would have felt exhausting for both of them, but 2 or 3 times a week, allowing space in between for each of them to recharge and live their separate lives fully. During these calls, they didn't always talk constantly. Sometimes Sina would put her laptop on her kitchen counter while she cooked dinner, and Milo would read a book on his side of the screen, both of them simply existing together in a kind of digital version of that comfortable silence they had always shared. It wasn't the same as being physically together, but it was enough to keep their connection alive and growing, even across such a great distance. Let's take another short pause here for a quick practice moment, because I think this next expression is really useful. When we talk about a relationship surviving difficulty, we often say it stood the test of time. This means it remained strong even through challenges, even through years passing. Try repeating that phrase with me now. Stood the test of time. Milo and Sina's relationship, through this difficult year of distance, was truly standing the test of time, proving to both of them that what they had built together was real and strong enough to survive real challenges. Around this same period, Milo's friendship with Ren, his childhood neighbor, also continued, though in a different form. Ren had become a professional illustrator, working on children's books, and though they lived in different cities now, they made an effort to see each other whenever Milo visited his hometown to see his family. Their friendship had that particular quality that only long, deep friendships have, where even after months apart, they could pick up exactly where they left off, without any awkwardness, without needing to catch up on every single detail, simply sliding back into that same comfortable, familiar closeness. I think this is worth mentioning because it shows another beautiful truth about how introverts build relationships. Introverts often don't collect large numbers of friends the way some extroverted people do. Instead, they tend to build a small number of extremely deep, long-lasting friendships, the kind that survive years of distance, changes in life circumstances, even long periods of silence between conversations, because the foundation was built so carefully and so honestly in the first place. Quality over quantity, as the saying goes. That phrase is really useful too. Quality over quantity means caring more about how good something is, rather than how much of it you have. Try saying that phrase with me. Quality over quantity. Now, let's return to Milo and Sina's story, because I know you're probably wondering how their long-distance year turned out. Around the 10-month mark, Sina called Milo one evening, and he could immediately tell something important was happening, just from the tone of her voice. She had been offered a promotion at her company, but it would mean staying in that distant city permanently rather than returning after the agreed year. For a moment, Milo felt his old fear rising up again, that instinct to go quiet, to withdraw and process everything alone before speaking. But this time, he caught himself. He remembered the lesson he had learned. He took a breath, and instead of going silent, he asked her directly, "How do you feel about it? What do you want?" Sina admitted that she loved the opportunity, but she also missed him more than she had ever expected to, more than she could have imagined possible before they were separated by distance. They talked for hours that night, honestly, openly, about what mattered most to each of them. And eventually, they arrived at a decision together, not a decision made alone in Milo's quiet, anxious mind, but a true partnership decision. Milo would apply for jobs in Sina's city. It wasn't an easy choice, leaving behind the small town, his family, the familiar comfort of the place he grew up in, but he realized that home isn't only a place. Sometimes home is a person, or in this case, a shared life you choose to build together, wherever that life happens to take place. The transition wasn't instantly easy, of course. Moving to a big, unfamiliar city was overwhelming for someone like Milo, who found large crowds and constant noise draining even in the best of circumstances. But he approached this challenge the way he had learned to approach everything else in his life, slowly, honestly, and true to himself. He didn't force himself to become a different person just to fit into this new, fast-paced city life. Instead, he found small pockets of quiet within the busy city, a peaceful park near their new apartment where he would walk every morning, a small, quiet coffee shop with only a handful of tables where he could read undisturbed, a tiny community garden where he eventually started volunteering on weekends, meeting other quiet, thoughtful people who, like him, preferred meaningful conversation over noisy socializing. Through that community garden, actually, Milo made a new close friend, an older man named Ambrose, who had emigrated from another country many years before, and who, despite the language difference between them at times, understood Milo perfectly without needing very many words at all. They would work side by side, planting vegetables, pulling weeds, watering rows of tomatoes and beans, talking occasionally, but mostly just enjoying each other's quiet company. Ambrose once told Milo, through a mixture of careful English and simple gestures, "Some men talk with their mouths. You, my friend, you talk with your hands and your eyes. I understand you completely." Milo treasured that friendship deeply, another proof that meaningful connection doesn't always require constant conversation. As the years passed, Milo and Sina eventually got married, in a small, quiet ceremony that reflected exactly who they both were. Nothing extravagant or loud, just their closest family and friends gathered together in a garden, including, of course, Wren, who cried through the entire short ceremony despite claiming beforehand that she definitely wouldn't. Milo's sister Dara gave a speech at the small reception afterward, and something she said that day has always stuck with me as I've thought about telling you this story today. She said, "My brother taught me that you don't have to be the loudest person in the room to have the biggest heart. Milo has always felt everything more deeply than the rest of us. He just needed the right people around him to help him find his voice." I think that's such a beautiful way to summarize everything we've talked about today, don't you? Milo's journey wasn't about becoming louder or more outgoing or pretending to be an extrovert to please the people around him. His journey was about learning to trust his own quiet nature, understanding that it wasn't a flaw to be fixed, but a genuine strength to be embraced and shared with the right people. The people who would take the time to truly understand and appreciate him. Now, before we wrap up today's episode, I want to take a moment to really pull out the key lessons from Milo's story, because I think they apply to so many of you listening right now, whether you're an introvert yourself or whether you love someone who is. First, remember that being quiet is not the same thing as being weak or boring or unfriendly. Quiet people often feel things more deeply than they express outwardly, and their listening skills can become one of their greatest strengths in building genuine, lasting relationships. Second, remember that introverts don't need dozens of friends to live a rich, fulfilling social life. A small number of deep, honest, carefully built relationships can be far more valuable and far more satisfying than a huge network of surface-level acquaintances. If you're an introvert yourself, don't feel pressured to compare your social life to someone else's. Your version of connection is valid, even if it looks different from what society often celebrates as the ideal. Third, and this might be the most important lesson of all, Remember that even introverts need to practice speaking up, especially in moments that matter most. Listening is a beautiful gift, but relationships also require honest, vulnerable communication from both sides. Milo had to learn this lesson the hard way, through that difficult conversation with Sina about their future together. But once he learned it, his relationships became even stronger and more resilient than before. And finally, if you love someone who is an introvert, please remember what we learned from Sana's patience and understanding throughout this story. Give your quiet loved ones space to recharge. Don't take their need for alone time personally. And when they do open up to you, even if it takes them longer than you expect, listen with the same care and patience they've probably been giving you all along, often without you even fully realizing it. Now let's do a little review, because I want to make sure some of today's key vocabulary really sticks in your memory before we finish up. We learned the word recharge, meaning to rest and restore your energy, especially useful for introverts after busy social situations. We learned the phrase comfortable silence, describing a peaceful quiet between two people who trust each other deeply. We learned the informal expression peopled out, meaning exhausted from too much social interaction. We talked about the difference between small talk, which many introverts find draining, and deep talk, which can actually be energizing for them. We learned the phrase solid foundation, describing something strong and reliable that other things are built upon. We learned stood the test of time, describing something, often a relationship, that remained strong through difficulty and challenge. And finally, we learned the expression quality over quantity, valuing depth and meaning over sheer numbers. Try to use at least 2 or 3 of these words or phrases today in a conversation with a friend, in your own private journal, or even just quietly in your own thoughts as you go about your day. Real language learning happens not just from listening, but from actively using what you've learned, even in small, simple ways. Before we close today's episode, I want to leave you with one more thought, something for you to sit with over the next few days. If you're an introvert, I hope Milo's story reminded you that your quiet nature has never been something broken that needed fixing. It's simply a different way of moving through the world, a different way of loving, connecting, and understanding other people. And if you're more extroverted, I hope this story helped you understand and appreciate the quiet people in your own life a little more deeply. The friend who doesn't talk much, but always remembers exactly what you told them weeks ago. The family member who shows love through small, thoughtful actions, rather than loud declarations. The partner who needs a little quiet time alone, before they can fully show up for you again. All right, that's it for today's episode, everyone. Thank you so much, truly, for spending this time with me, whether you were doing chores around your house, walking somewhere, commuting to work, or just relaxing quietly with your eyes closed, letting the story and the language wash over you. If you enjoyed today's episode, and if Milo's story touched you even a little bit, please take just a moment to hit that subscribe button so you never miss a new episode of English in Fluency. It genuinely helps this little podcast grow, and it helps me keep bringing you these slow, easy, story-based episodes every single week. I would also absolutely love to hear from you. Leave a comment and tell me, are you more of an introvert, an extrovert, or maybe a little bit of both, somewhere comfortably in between. Tell me about someone quiet in your life who has taught you something valuable, the way Milo taught the people around him throughout this story. And if you know someone, a friend, a student, a family member, who is also learning English, and who might enjoy a slow, gentle story like this one, please consider sharing this episode with them. You never know. It might be exactly the kind of listening practice they've been looking for. Until next time, keep listening, keep practicing, and remember, whether you're quiet or loud, whether you process the world in silence or out loud, your voice, in whatever form it takes, truly matters. This has been Alex, and this is English in Fluency. Take care of yourselves. Be kind to the quiet people around you, and I'll see you in the next episode.